When you hear Burger King, you probably think of the global fast food giant, right? The Whopper, the Crown, all of it. Well, what if I told you that in Pune, India, that name has belonged to a local street vendor for decades? And when these two kings finally went head to head, it kicked off a legal battle that lasted for over a decade. 13 years. Let that sink in for a second. That's how long this fight went on. I mean, just try to imagine a small local business going toe-to-toe with a massive corporation in court for that long. It really tells you just how high the stakes were for both sides in this absolutely wild story. It sounds like the perfect David versus Goliath story, doesn't it? But the real question is, how did this actually happen? How on earth did a local vendor in India manage to take on and ultimately beat one of the biggest, most recognizable brands on the planet? Okay, let's dive in and unpack this.
So the whole thing officially kicked off back in 2011. That's when the American Fast Food Corporation filed a lawsuit against the Pune vendor. The charge? Trademark infringement. The corporation basically said, hey, that's our name, you can't use it, and they wanted them to stop, plain and simple.
Now, to really get how this case was decided, we need to talk about the legal concept at the very heart of it all, the trademark. Seriously, everything hinged on how the court looked at this one simple but incredibly powerful idea. The easiest way to think about a trademark is like a brand's unique fingerprint. It's the name, the logo, the specific design that tells you, yep, this is the real deal from this company. The whole point is to make sure customers don't get confused. But, and this is the key part for our story, that protection isn't always global. It can be very territorial. So, when you have two businesses using the exact same name in the same place, how does the law figure out who gets to keep it? Well, it often comes down to one very simple but incredibly powerful question. Who was there first? So in one corner, you've got the local vendor from Pune, and in the other, the American fast food giant. On paper, it seems like a complete mismatch, right? An unfair fight. But as we're about to see, this case wasn't about who was bigger or who had more money. It was all about timing. And here it is. This is the timeline that changes everything. Look at these dates. The Pune vendors started their business all the way back in 1992. The American corporation didn't officially enter the Indian market until 2014. That means the local shop was operating under the name Burger King for 22 years before the global brand even showed up. So once you see that timeline, the court's decision suddenly starts to make a whole lot of sense. What seemed like a shocking upset on the surface was actually a very logical conclusion. It was all based on the simple facts of the case, and you just can't argue with that kind of history. The court's verdict was crystal clear. They stated that the Pune vendor's use of the name was, and I quote, honest and legal. In other words, because they were there first in that specific territory, they had established the right to use the name. It really was as simple as that. No infringement, case closed. This case is so much more than just a great underdog story. It's a huge deal because it sets a really important precedent for trademark law, with real-world consequences for businesses of all sizes, not just in India, but all over the world. So the big takeaway here is the power of what's called prior use. This case proves that if you're a local business and you can prove you were using a name first in your area, you have a really strong legal claim to it. It's a powerful protection for small entrepreneurs against massive corporations that might try to muscle in later on. So in the end, the law sided with the local entrepreneur over the global giant. It was a victory for the little guy, based on the simple principle of first come, first served. But what do you think about all this? Is this how trademark law should work? Should a huge global brand have to change its name when it enters a new market where a local business is already using it? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.